In the last video, I finished by talking about Manuel Chrysalis and how he is an inspiring teacher who brings the study of Greek to Renaissance Italy. In this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of his most prominent students. We're going to begin with Kalucho Salutati. And Salutati is someone who leads a distinguished career in the government of the city of Florence. And so he claimed that it's a higher end simply to contemplate nature and contemplate God and contemplate human individuals in the way that Petrarch had done, but that he felt himself called to serve in the city government. And so at the same time as he is a genuine intellectual, writing books about language and religion and uncovering new manuscripts, he's also working as the chancellor of the city and using his position to promote humanism and Renaissance learning. And one of the most important contributions that he makes is to recruit Chrysalis to come to Florence on a permanent basis and to be paid with public funds. He founds a public library of 600 books. Who does he do this working with? With the leading politician in Florence at the time, Cosimo de' Medici. So we see again how these two spheres of influence, the sphere of political power and the sphere of education, are overlapping here. Now, Salutati uses his training as a humanist to support Florence, support the city of Florence. And this is an approach called civic humanism. It's the practical application of humanism. So when the plague broke out in Florence, Salutati remained at his post. He didn't abandon the city. He continued to maintain order in the community, and he saw this as living out the example of heroes in history who he had studied before. He makes peace with the Ciompi and the merchant elite, advocates against harsh reprisals for the good of the community, and he makes speeches encouraging peace between the different Italian city-states and developing alliances with the other cities such as Venice to form alliances against the city of Milan. Remember that the city of Milan at this time, under the leadership of the Visconti, is trying to unify all of Italy under their rule to make themselves the kings of all of Italy. And Salutati uses his training in rhetoric to convince the other city-states to resist the city of Milan. And his rhetoric is seen as so persuasive that the Visconti even tried to assassinate him. He was seen, even though he wasn't necessarily a great general, simply his use of language and rhetoric was seen as a very effective form of opposition against them. Leonardo Bruni was another chancellor of Florence, the chancellor that followed Salutati. He's someone else who is both engaged in public works and public support at the same time as he is developing and promoting humanism. So he writes a history of the city. And when he writes this history of the city, he models it on the ancient Roman historian Livy's history of the city of Rome. And so he is trying to draw parallels between the two cities. He's trying to inspire the citizens of Florence to sacrifice and defend the city of Florence in the same way that the heroes of ancient Rome had. And then the last humanist who we're going to discuss today is Poggio Brachiolini. He was born again near Florence. He studied under Chrysalis. He was a friend of Salutati, and he worked for the Renaissance papacy. So all these different worlds tied together. And he attends the Council of Constance. Remember, this is the council that brings the Great Western Schism to an end. During a break in the council, he visited the very ancient monastery of St. Gall that was near to the site of the council. And he and his companions were thrilled to discover ancient texts buried in the back of the old monastery library. So basically what had happened is you had monks who were copying down texts as fast as they could to make copies of texts from the ancient world. And this was an incredible service. It was because of these monks that these texts survived. But the monks themselves didn't necessarily understand these texts. And so during the medieval period, weren't particularly interested in ancient texts about literature or history. These texts were stuffed in the back of the library, and they were forgotten. And now they're discovered by Brachiolini and his companions. And Brachiolini leads the way in discovering ancient texts, bringing these ancient texts to light so that the humanists can learn from them. And so this, in the end, is the great achievement and the legacy of Chrysaorus, that it's his students who provide the foundations for the Renaissance program of education, whether they're students like Brachiolini, who are discovering ancient texts that are studied as part of these programs, or he's studying people like Vigerius and Guarino de Verona, who are considered the great teachers, great educators, who design the Renaissance curriculums of the day. All of them were taught by Chrysaorus and influenced by his love of learning and his love to share the knowledge that could be gained from learning Greek and Latin. So this is where we're going to leave the study of ancient learning for this particular segment. Then later on in this week, we're going to look at Renaissance education. But I basically want to conclude with asking the question, why is it that these people saw uncovering the learning of the ancient world as so important? Why didn't they just come up with new ways of learning on their own? Part of it is about understanding their identity, excuse me, by understanding the past. Who had come before them, who had formed the society they lived in. This was something they wanted to understand. Secondly, it's about learning to interact with other human beings. Even if these human beings are dead, we see Petrarch writing letters to the people of the ancient world. Why discovering the learning of the ancient world is so important is it's a way of interacting with human beings and learning more about human nature and learning what human beings are capable of. And at this time, in the second half of the 14th century, first half of the 15th century, this was the most exciting thing going in this society. And it was this interest in uncovering the learning of the ancient world that would drive many of the other achievements of this period.